Hi guys. Well, it's Sunday. I missed Friday, and we are behind on slides. So I thought I would go ahead and just record these. I don't know how far we are in each class, but I will say that we're probably around slide 8, so not very far in. And I figured I would go ahead and just kick it off here with the church anyway. And in the background, I've got a little medieval music, so why not? Maybe some medieval music and me doing these slides for you. So, anyway, that's what we'll do on Monday, and then we'll have the test on Tuesday, and we'll get your project started on Wednesday. That's my hope, anyway, at least. So, I want to say we kind of ended around Veronica's somewhere, and just depend on which class you're in. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with Adlin's. And these are mostly slides from fourth and fourth period and eighth period, but there are a few from sixth period in here. So anyway, here is Adlin's. Let me get my face out of the way. All right. So Adlin says in Europe during the late 1200s and 1300s, the popes of churches had a series of problems. This led to a decline of power in the pope. So for a while, the kings have been struggling with the popes. The popes gained more and more power all the way up to the 1200s. Especially with the Crusades, they were able to harness the forces of Europe and have the Crusaders attack the Middle East. And the popes believed that they had divine authority over the kings, and the kings didn't like that. And so what you start to see is a conflict between the kings and the popes. All right, so how does this problem manifest? Well, King Philip IV claimed the right to tax the clergy. Pope Boniface argued that the clergy required his consent as popes are supreme over church and state. Philip rejected it and sent out Frenchmen for Boniface. Boniface escaped and died soon after. Philip helped with the election of Frenchman Clement V as Pope in 1305. So we may have gone over some of this in some of your classes, but this is the era of the two popes. And so what happens is there's a dispute between the French king and the Pope in Rome, and the French king goes after the Pope in Rome. The Pope escapes France and dies, and the king is like, well, I'm going to appoint my own Pope. Now, the rest of the Catholic Church is like, wait a minute. Kings cannot appoint popes. So even though the king had French cardinals do it, the rest of the cardinals throughout Europe came together and promoted their own pope. Since the pope was the Bishop of Rome, the people believed he should, I'm going to have to move my picture to the lower right-hand corner, live in Rome. But him and the cardinals lived in Avignon until 1377, when they gave in and returned to Rome. So Avignon is the city that the French popes lived in. All right, now, as you can imagine, if there's two popes, you're going to have a crisis. So pretty soon, they begin to start calling each other antichrists. So it would be like, hey, I'm the real pope. That guy over there is the antichrist. He's teaching against Christ. I'm the real pope. I have the direct phone line to God. Okay, so the Great Schism by Adipoo. Gregory the 11th died soon after his return to Rome. They elected an Italian pope, Urban the Sixth. 5 months later, the French cardinals declared the election valid. They chose a Frenchman as pope. I'm wondering if Addy means invalid. All right, so there's the realm of the Catholic Church. You can see on the map that Addison has. And Avignon is somewhere here in France, whereas Rome is down here by by the city of Rome. And it's really a conflict between like the popes down here in Rome and this city up here in France. All right, because Urban remained in Rome, there were now two popes, which created the Great Schism of the Church, lasting from 1378 to 1417. The Great Schism divided Europe. France and its allies supported the Pope in Avignon, and England and its allies supported the Pope in Rome. How many popes were there? Oh, 2, 4, 6, or 8. Well, I'm going to say 2, Daddy Fields. All right, damage to the church by Cyberbad Boy. The Pope was seen as a true leader of Christendom. When all the lines of the Pope denounced each other as Antichrist, so they had a meeting and resolved the schism. I think what Liam's trying to say here is everybody was starting to see it was splitting the church, it was splitting Europe, and so they agreed to have a meeting and select the real Pope here. So what was the Pope seen as? Glue, dog backwards, a true leader of Christendom, or God? Well, it would be number 3. All right, there was some crisis in the Catholic Church that led to calls for reform during this time period. In England, John Wycliffe's disgust with clerical corruption led him to a far-ranging attack on papal authority. When the families of England and Bohemia got married, Wycliffe's ideas spread to Czech reformers led by John Huss. Huss was accused of heresy by the Council of Constance and burned at the stake in 1415. Remember that if you disagree with church teachings, that's actually cause for the church to burn you at the stake. Now, I want you to look at the dates here. Notice we're in the 1400s. And this is really where we begin to end the school year with world history, which I try and bring you up to colonization. So when does Christopher Columbus discover America? It's 1495. And so what we start to see is a migration away from Europe to the Americas, and part of it is a result of this religious persecution. The Czechs led a revolutionary upheaval after that, and it didn't stop until 1436. The Huss's ideas later impacted a German monk by the name of Martin Luther. Not Martin Luther King, Martin Luther. We'll talk about Martin Luther later. Martin Luther was the founder of Protestant religions, which are most of the churches in the United States. And the very first branch of the Protestant religion is the Lutheran Church. All right. By around the early 1400s, the Pope could not assert supremacy over the state much longer. The papacy and the church had lost a lot of their authority. So what time was this in? The 1400s. Good job, Thomas. In the late Middle Ages, the 100-Year War was the most violent war struggle during this period. King Edward III was also the Duke of Gascony. All right, so we did watch, as for your Ed puzzle, the 100-Year War. And so what Tinkle Molis is talking about here is the beginning of what we call the 100-Year War. It was a war that lasted for 100 years, from the early 1300s to the early 1400s. And it's really kind of the beginnings of modern warfare, because we see the introduction of cannons and guns, and we see there's a shift in troops from these single solitary knights in shining armor to peasants fighting with guns. So, what was most struggled war, violent war in the late Middle Ages? Tinkle's War, Nemo's War, the 100-Year War, or Adipoo's War? Well, I'm guessing that's probably the 100-Year War. All right, Kobe Sparks says King Philip VI is our who. Started a war with King Edward III, that's the what, when in 1337, where they fought over the Duchy of Gascony in France. How? With many knights. Why? King Philip wanted the land and have more power, so he attacked Edward's land. All right, so France's power is growing during this time period. And the hang up for France is that probably the most powerful noble in France is also the King of England. And so what we're seeing is, even though the King of England is supposed to swear loyalty to the King of France, you have two very powerful men, and we get a head-to-head fighting here. So the fighting begins over Gascony, which belongs to the English king in France, but the King of France says, I'm going to take it. All right, so that's the beginning of this war. All right, the Knights. The 100 Years' War had been England and France, proved to be the turning point in warfare. Trained knights viewed battle as a way to show their fighting ability. However, peasant foot soldiers won the chief battles of the war. So the reason that we get peasants winning is the improvement of long-distance weapons that can pierce armor. So those improvements being, first, the longbow with a special arrow that could pierce through a knight's armor. And then the next improvement would be the invention of the rifle and the cannon. Okay, now the cannon played a heavy role in this, and the reason why the cannon plays a heavy role in this is because for the first time you've got something really that can punch holes in the walls of a castle. So France's heavily armed noble cavalrymen viewed foot soldiers as social inferiors. The English also used heavily armed cavalry, but they relied more on large numbers of peasants paid to be foot soldiers. English soldiers were armed with heavy pikes or spears and longbows, which had greater attack power, greater range, and faster rate of fire than the crossbow, formerly the weapon of choice. So how did the nobles of France look at the foot soldiers? Numbers of peasants, social inferiors, paid to be infantry soldiers. I'm going to say social inferiors on that one. Okay, this is Layla's side. The first major battle of the 100 Years' War occurred at Crécy in 1346. The large French army followed no battle plan and attacked in a disorderly fashion. The English archers devastated them. So the French by far had a much bigger army, but their army's based on this kind of archaic style of jousting and heavily plated armor, and it's based on, we're going to go head-to-head with knights, right? And so we're going to do a lance charge with our knights versus the other side. Well, in this case, the other side used archers. So the French charged their horses into battle. The archers shot them down, and they would shoot their horses right out from underneath them. So when did the first major battle of the 100 Years' War occur? That'd be 1346. All right, the Battle of Crécy was not planned, even though English did not have enough resources to conquer all of France. They still tried. King Henry V, the English king, won the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. In this battle, 1,500 French nobles were killed, and that's by Shadibella. All right, what battle was not planned? The Battle of Crécy. And there's some cool pictures in the background of it. The seemingly hopeless French cause now fell into the hands of Charles, the heir of the French throne. Though only 17, Joan's sincerity and simplicity persuaded Charles to allow her to accompany a French army to Orleans. Apparently inspired by Joan's faith, the French armies found new confidence and seized Orleans. Okay, this is where we're talking about Joan of Arc. So what's I think probably draws a lot of curiosity about Joan of Arc is she is one of the only peasant women that rises to prominence in Europe. And so we have noble women that play roles in courts. We have women that played roles in guilds in the cities. But Joan is like one of the only peasants that she comes to power. She rises from power because she has a what she says is a vision from God. And she talks about having this vision that if she's to lead an army, she can fight against the English, right? So the French are demoralized. They've been beaten by the English. And along comes Joan of Arc and says, no, God's on our side. I've had a vision from God and I'm going to lead us to victory. And she does. She does lead the French to victory. Now, this is kind of a turning point in the war, and this is where the French basically pushed the English out of France, right? English captured Joan in 1430 and turned her over to the Inquisition on charges of witchcraft. At the time, visions were thought to be inspired either by God or the devil. Joan's achievements were decisive as the war dragged on for 2 decades. So, depend on which side you were on. If you were French, you really believed that Joan's visions were from God. Both sides believed God was on their side, right? Remember, they're both supporting 2 different popes. Each pope's calling the other pope an antichrist. Joan has this vision. She believes it's from God. The French believe it's from God. But when the English capture her, they're like, nope, you're a witch. We don't like you. We're burning you alive at the stake. So here's the thing about Joan. Again, she was a peasant. Time and time again, she beats the English in battle. She's kind of betrayed by the French king because she's getting so much popularity. When she gets captured by the English, she kind of gets set up and she gets captured by the English. When she does, they burn her at the stake for being a witch. Now, that goes down big time in history as being a strong woman, a woman of low means who rose to the top and who led armies to fight the English. And even though she's burned alive at the stake, she plays a really prominent role in French history. All right, Big Tooth Krill, Chapter 12, Lesson 4, page 5, the bottom. In the 1300s, many monarchies, dynasties were unable to create male heirs, or heirs to the throne, heir to the throne. So the founders of those dynasties made people fight for their positions. Along with this issue, rulers often ran into financial problems. What were the monarchies unable to create? Male heirs? Probably not food, probably not money. I'm sure they could create bald men if they really put their minds to it. All right, so more on the monarchies. In the 1400s, a number of new rulers in Europe tried to establish the centralized power of monarchies. So, what we're starting to see during this time period is the smaller fiefs are getting eaten up by the bigger fiefs. And nobles are starting to absorb more land. They're going to battle with each other. They're unifying countries, or they're unifying their territories, and they're starting to become the modern day countries of Europe. Some people have spoken of these new states as the new monarchies. This term applies to the monarchies of France, England, and Spain. So probably the 3 most prominent right off the bat would be France, England, Spain. There are a few others. There's like Scotland's out there, Russia in the east, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Germany and Italy still kind of in turmoil. There's still a lot of these like little duchies and little estates held by noblemen that are all kind of interfighting with each other. What year did the new number of rulers try to establish the centralized powers of monarchies That would be the 1400s. France in the 100-Year War. There was a strong degree of French national sentiment towards a common enemy. The kings used that spirit to establish royal power. So we're going to go kingdom by kingdom now, right? So France is really kind of the first. France and England are the first real, I guess, I want to say, modern states of Europe, followed by Spain. So those three are the top three. All right, the development of the French state. Oh, wow, look at that. That's pretty. The Eiffel Tower by Reina. The development of a strong French state. A strong French state was greatly advanced by King Louis by King Louis XI, who ruled from 1461 to 1483. Louis strengthened the use of the taille, an annual direct tax, usually on land or property. A strong blank blank was greatly advanced by King Louis IX. Italian state, Mexican state, Salvadorian state, French state. I'm guessing that's French state. Okay, England. Something that affected England would be the 100 Years' War. England was faced with even greater when civil conflicts erupted. Henry Tudor established a new dynasty in 1485. When did Henry Tudor establish a new dynasty? 1485, remember? Columbus sails the ocean blue in 1492. No? Did I say that wrong? In 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue? Yes. So we're getting really close to the period of colonization here, especially by Spain. Henry V worked to create a strong royal government. He ended the wars of the nobles by destroying their private armies. Henry ended up winning their support. Who worked hard to create a strong royal government? That would be Henry V. Okay, let's talk about Spain. Now, unlike France and England, which kind of form out of the 100 Years' War, Spain forms more by I want to call it the Reconquest, or no, it was a crusade. England or Christian knights were pushing Spanish Muslims, the Moors who were Muslims, out of Spain. So Spain also experienced a huge growth of monarchy in strength at the end of the 1400s. Christian rulers in Spain fought Muslims to regain their land. Several independent Christian kingdoms emerged to reconquest the Iberian Peninsula. Among them were Aragon and Castile. So a lot of people complain that Spanish, or proper Spanish, is what we call Castilian Spanish, and trust me, I'm not a Spanish expert. I don't speak Spanish, but the Spanish that we speak in North America, from my understanding, is almost like a mishmash Spanish. So there's a lot of English in it, and then there's also a Central American influence from the Native Americans of Central America in there. The actual, I guess what the pure Spanish of Spain would be the Castilian Spanish, which is based somewhere around Madrid, I think. And that would be what we would consider Castilian Spanish. All right, Aragon and Castile were strong kingdoms of Spain. Isabella of Castile married Ferdinand of Aragon in 1469. Isabella and Ferdinand worked together to strengthen their monarchy. They thought that religious unity was needed for political unity. In 1492, they expelled Jews who did not convert to Catholicism. So, notice the years. Isabella is the one who sends Christopher Columbus to America, right? He proposes it as a business venture. Her court experts are like, yeah, he's not wrong. The world is round. It's not flat. Take that, flat earthers. And so she's going to be the one that supports his mission with 3 ships. Look at the year, 1492. They had just pushed the Muslims out of Spain, and in that same year they expel all Jews from Spain. And so they're like a crusader state. They've come about because Christians were kind of in a state of continual warfare with the Muslims since 1100. So, who did they expel if not converted to Catholicism? Your mom, the Germans, or the Jews? Ferdinand and Isabella in 1492, after the final loss of their army of Ferdinand and Isabella, Muslims had the chance of converting to Christianity or going into exile. Ferdinand and Isabel, the most Catholic monarchs, achieved their goal of religious uniformity. To be Spanish was to be Catholic. All right, so to be Spanish was to be smart, important, Catholic, or weird. I'm going to say Catholic on that one. And there's their pictures. Now, check her out. There she is. This lady's responsible for the colonization of the New World, for good or for evil. It happened. Here we are 600 years later, and because of that, we have several new cultures and countries. All right, it's your grandpa Silverfish. Well, there you go. France, England, and Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, did not develop a strong monarchy authority. Germany was a land of hundreds of states, and they acted independently of their German ruler. In 1438, the position of the Holy Roman Emperor was held by the Habsburg dynasty, who ruled the Austrian lands along the Danube. Who held the position of Holy Roman Emperor in 1438? Mr. Fields, Burger King, the Habsburg dynasties, your mom. Wow, your mom is like really popular in this today. Yes, it's the Habsburg dynasty. Y'all are going to have to make your multiple choices a little better. Oh, and there's a nice map of it. All right, so what we're talking about here is the German states. Even though there's like hundreds of these states, they're kind of in this loose confederation that they call an empire, and supposedly there's an emperor, although he doesn't necessarily have the power that a true emperor would have. All right. So, Central and Eastern Europe. This is be our last slide by Dalia Moreno. In Eastern Europe, rulers found it difficult to control their states. Religious differences troubled the Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox Christians, and the Mongols and Muslims. Russia was under Mongol dominance since the 1200s. By 1480, Ivan III had thrown off the yoke of the Mongols. The next ruler of Muscovy, Ivan IV, was recognized as the true ruler and Tsar of Russia by the Orthodox Church. He was also, I think one of the two of them was known as Ivan the Terrible. It might have been Ivan IV. So, and that's because he was just such a brutal, bloodthirsty guy. All right, I don't know that there's really a question here, Dolly. Oh, here it is. Who was recognized as the true ruler and Tsar of Russia? Ivan III, Muscovy, Ivan IV, Orthodox. I'm going to say Ivan IV was recognized. Okay. All right. So, if I'm not mistaken, that's it for our slideshows. I'm going to take us back one slide. I do want to say that I was looking at your Ed Puzzles today, and I was surprised at how many kids have not done the Ed Puzzle. I don't know why I'm always surprised by that, but some of you, your grades are really starting to go down in this fourth quarter. What I would suggest to you is that you get on and you get some of those Ed Puzzles submitted and get those scores up. I've at this point in time, I've got several Fs, and some of those Fs might be bleeding into your semester grade. So what I want you to do, this is going to be on Ed Puzzle. I'm going to remind you at the beginning of class tomorrow, check your Ed Puzzle scores. I will be taking all the Ed Puzzles from the time that we got back from spring break all the way up until now, and I'm going to average them. Right now, some of your averages are really low. Like I've got some kids that have like 1 out of 10 points or 2 out of 10 points. So do yourself a favor. Don't be that kid. You need to have those scores up, that average up. And there's some of you that also need to go back in and recomplete some tests. I've got some kids that don't have scores in. There are some zeros in the scorebook. So you need to get on and look at your grades. Even though progress reports just came out recently, you need to think about getting those scores up and having a look at what you need to submit to move on. Because the big thing is world history is a credit. If you don't pass second semester, you're going to have to retake it. You probably end up retaking it as a junior or a senior. You probably really don't want to do that. Just saying. So think about that. Look at getting your stuff in, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Oh, look at that. 30 minutes. We got it all done in 30 minutes. Great. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.